Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Big leaks emerging last night, but not on the Rostermania front, but instead the upcoming Call of Duty title we believe is going to be called Modern Warfare 3. The big complaints about last year's game primarily were no ninja, no dead silence, and no red dots on the minimap. Those two things are apparently coming back into this year's game. Is there actually reason for that much optimism though? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. First of all, we've got to dive into this, which I thought was just such an incredible story that Wailers and co, we talked about this yesterday, did qualify for the VCT Pro League. An incredibly difficult thing to do actually, because the tier 2 scene in Valorant is hyper competitive, and there's so, especially in the European side, so many great players and teams in that region that have done great things in the Pro League before. You've got to be the best team in tier 2, hands down, and you've got to win the big tournament to make it, and that's what Gentlemates did. It also escaped my realization initially that Gentlemates, these guys, M8 or whatever, like they are owned, or at least founded, in part by Gataga, another obviously legendary French streamer, but also classic Call of Duty player as well, as Wailers is and has been. So this was a really great story, and it's honestly incredible. I do wonder whether there's any future in this, that other COD players will look at this and wonder, you know what, could I potentially do what Wailers has done here in the future? We know that Zaptius tried to make the transition, as Wailers says, you know, we've done it, we're in the VCT, have no words, I am so happy. I've tried to learn French a little bit recently, so I'll try like a good little bit of practice here. I can't believe it, I have no words. Thanks to you, thanks to the staff, thanks to the CEO, thanks to Gentlemates, and thanks for believing in us. We close this chapter in style, something like that. But yeah, so congrats to Wailers, so cool. And honestly, they dominated the series, right? And look, this French team, I don't understand how some of these guys weren't signed, to be honest, by better French rosters in the actual Pro League. But they'll be there now for next season, and Wailers really held his own in this one. And I do wonder, right, I mean, you look at other players, this is Wailers back in the day, this is 2016, right, when he was on Vitality, but even he played COD for a lot longer than this. Legendary player in the French scene, absolutely, was around for many years. He was just playing Challenger Cups like a year ago. He was playing Challenger Cups in the Call of Duty side, and it wasn't really working out from there, so he decided to make the transition, and on keyboard and mouse, right, and it's incredibly rare that players have pulled this off. Nifty is one that comes to mind. If you guys have been around for a long time, you'll know that Nifty played before he became like Envy Nifty and was on their CSGO team for a while, and never really achieved that much in CS, to be fair, but he was a notable player in the Call of Duty landscape. In Black Ops 2 there's a famous moment of like you know, Nifty wins the gunfight on Standoff, Capture the Flag against JCap and co that it was back then, so that was a legendary one. Then he transitioned to CS and there was all the talk about that, but this is a greater achievement for sure, because Wailers now officially in the Pro League, and of course people will wonder, could any other players pull this off? Definitely a lot of the guys that play Call of Duty on a high level are mechanically gifted at whatever they play. Dashy is one of them. He's great on the keyboard and mouse, and even like the likes of Karma, right? Like I've seen Karma play on keyboard and mouse, and it's like the guy's just so good anyway at whatever he picks up. Not saying Karma's going to make the transition, but Dashy has mentioned in the past that if things, you know, if he doesn't enjoy Call of Duty so much anymore, he wants to go in a different direction, that he actually might consider a transition to Valorant. He would have to do, I imagine, the same thing that Wailers did, go into tier 2 and grind it out and try and win Ascension, but it's doable. Wailers has shown that it's doable, so I don't expect that to happen for Dashy, but maybe for some players in Zaptius's position, I think he tried to make it. Other players might think similarly now, with you know, if they're particularly good on the keyboard and mouse, they might think about trying to make a transition like that way out. And of course, the ecosystem over there in Valorant is conducive to actually allowing you to make it in this sense, which is something that we don't necessarily have in the CDL, where the Awobobs guys, they can't qualify for the Pro League, they need to get picked up. And that's why they've released a couple of their players yesterday. So the team of aBeZy, Linz, aBeZy and Cobra, they've released both aBeZy and Cobra from their team. I imagine that's because they don't expect to be able to get a buyout for these guys from the CDL, so they're letting them go as UFAs, whereas aBeZy and Linz, that is pretty interesting that they're keeping them around, just because it implies that there might well be some interest. I'm sure there'll be interest for aBeZy, but Linz as well as a duo could be pretty interesting. Of course, also French-speaking team last season, but aBeZy's English is pretty good and all this, as is aBeZy's. But there'll be some interest there, and I know that many people have said, oh, Thieves should just go for aBeZy and something like that, just to see if he's got what it takes, and I don't think that's a bad idea at all. But therefore, Wobobobs, you know, if they can get a bit of a buyout for that, I think that'd be pretty wise. And I know the founder here, he said like, look, they're not going to charge anything anything outrageous, but you know, there's going to be some buyout involved, and fair enough, they supported these guys through and want to reap the returns to a certain extent. Linz did reveal a little while ago now that he's a restricted free agent, and that remains the case as it stands. Let's talk then about this upcoming COD game, because despite what Attach is going to be tweeting out about it's going to be the best COD game of all time, I'm sure he's trying to get those Elon Musk dollars in his pocket, right, because the creator, whatever's going on Twitter right now. But Slasher was very vocal this past season, and I think for very good reason, on the state of the game. At what point do we get a crumb of support? I'm sure I made a spicy video about this at the time. Staircase cheating, snaking, no red dots, hearing enemies across the map, and much more. How are you supposed to get consistently better when awareness and everything is legit handed to every player? Can we get a skill gap back? And this was a key complaint. Obviously, we've got the staircase glitches, we've got snaking as a thing. Sound EQ is not necessarily the fault of the game, it's just something that's built into Windows. And if you don't force the players to disable it, then you have some issues on your hands. But the key points were, I mean, these 2 points, right? No red dots on the minimap and hearing enemies across the map. The red dots one was pretty interesting because from a normal playing perspective, it makes the game significantly worse. From a pro player's perspective on a very high level, there is an argument to say, should red dots actually be there? Does it give too much awareness? Does it actually reduce the skill gap, because the best teams with the best comms will be able to call it? You guys remember when Clay got that 1v3? It was on Fortress, he was just laying down and they just ran out in, I think it was New York, was it not? It just ran out in front of him and died. And it's like, if they had better comms, they would have known where he was and traded him out. So maybe there's a skill gap that adds, because with red dots, there's no way Clay gets that 1v3, but without red dots, it's possible. So the red dots thing was a big talking point early on, but over the course of the season, the pros seemed to calm down a little bit about the red dots. It's the ninja and the dead silence perk that to me ruins the game, honestly. Search and destroy is ruined when there's no ninja, to be honest. It's playable. Okay, there's dead silence, you can activate it, but you've got to wait around. It makes the gameplay so slow, just like Modern Warfare 2019 was, and Vanguard was not a good game. I'm not going to accept any revisionist history that Vanguard was actually good, but I will admit that those that say that Vanguard was more fun to play and to watch than Modern Warfare 2 have a fair point, in part. It wasn't a good game, but I agree that it actually had ninja, right? And it was playable in Search and Destroy. Maybe in part the map, especially something like Tuscan, was pretty good. So there were some things that Vanguard had going for it with respect to what we just played for the last year or so. So last night the leakers come around with the first batch of updates on the new game, and I've expected this, to be honest, for some time. The game is launching in a few months. I mean, there's going to be a beta, I'm sure, at some point soon, and yet we really have no information on what it's even going to be like, what it's going to be called, but we're pretty sure that it's going to be Modern Warfare 3. Sledgehammer might have been working on effectively a Modern Warfare 2 2.0 for the second year, and then they decided we can actually make more money if we just make an entirely new game. So that's what they're going to do. Sledgehammer are putting it together. It's probably going to be, because they don't have all that much time to do it, a copy and paste of last year's game, Modern Warfare 2. It's probably going to be basically copy and paste, but hopefully with some tweaks, because Modern Warfare 2 could have been a much better game than it was with a few additions, and we're going to get into what those might have been. Now, supposedly perks might well be changing again. I don't know what their obsession is with just changing the perk system every year, but there's going to be vests. And if you put on a different vest, it gives you a different kind of perk outfit. So you might actually be able to tell by what somebody's wearing what sort of perks they have on. I don't really care about this type of stuff. This is what I'm interested in. The ninja perk is returning, it seems, this is a rumor, but Charlie Intel tweeted out as well, in some form or another. Perks are expected to be traditional, but gear-based like ninja is special boots, different gloves for reload speed, which is pretty funny. So you can put on your like silent boots or something, and that'll make you go. So that's kind of like how they might integrate the ninja perk, is that you can actually put on certain gear that will give you perks in a sense. Like the different faster reload speed gloves is pretty funny, but whatever. I don't really care how they execute it, as long as ninja exists. And this is good to see and probably expected, right? Because Sledgehammer did add, after a lot of criticism to Vanguard, you guys remember the Vanguard beta? I'm pretty sure there was no dead silence in the Vanguard beta, and then, or at least in the early build, there was no dead silence, and then they added it. They're like, all right, ninja, it's going to be a perk, it's going to be here, and it makes Search and Destroy especially play way better. Playing for sound cues becomes less relevant. You can actually make plays at the start of rounds without having to wait it out. It just makes search and destroy way better, and it reduces the skill gap so much when there's no dead silence around, I think, because people just get free information. You just sit somewhere, you camp, you just turn up your headset, and you just hear what the other guy's trying to do. It favors the guy not taking map control, not taking plays, and it just, doesn't make any sense from a competitive integrity standpoint as far as I'm concerned. So we want it to be back in the game. Hopefully it will be. There's also talk about the classic minimap returning. Bob Network UK says classic minimap could be returning in some form. So some form sounds obviously a little bit concerning, but Bob says it could be a perk. So that's, I guess, what he thinks, is that it's going to be there, but it might be a perk you have to put on in order to activate it. So, that wouldn't be the end of the world. I'm sure they could actually use said perk, and we think it's going to be Modern Warfare 3. Ninja perk, perks equipped with some sort of gear and equipment, classic minimap. So these are the key things, and honestly, if we get the same game again as last year with these additions, it's going to be a big upgrade, right? I don't think that Modern Warfare 2 would have been so bad if it had these things in it. And if it's the same game again, fair enough. And honestly, some teams might be quite happy for it to be the same game again with a few improvements, because they know on last year's title who was good, who was bad. That was actually one of the big talking points going into the second year of the cycle, which we thought this was going to be the second year of the cycle. It's turned out we're going to get a new game, but it might be very similar, is that teams in the off-season between the two games can know, all right, this guy's actually good at this title, because sometimes players are good or bad at certain titles. aBeZy was way better this year than he was last year. There was also some leaks of the UI, the user interface, but if I share any of those, we're getting chalked by Activision straight away. And to be fair, I think all of them have already been deleted off the internet pretty much because Activision came crashing down. There was also talk about the war game mode from World War II returning into play, which was kind of a mode where you'd have certain objectives throughout the map that your team would try and push forward and capture all the objectives, and then the other team would try and push you back, and certain like control points. There was a game mode that was kind of similar called Momentum that they brought into Advanced Warfare, and that was based on a game I believe called War that was originally in World at War. So anyway, that's maybe a competitive mode, but I don't think it'd be better than any of the third modes that we currently have, primarily control. And Jacob L says, some of the stuff I've heard about the early builds made me really optimistic. A lot has changed since, but really hope that Ninja stays. So every year we get all this optimism. The leakers say, oh, it's going to be so good, all these good things are happening, and I think at this point we've realised that it's better just to wait and see what happens here rather than get your hopes up for no reason at all. So I'm not going to be too optimistic on this. Hopefully it's better than last year. But I think if you'd have told the community that this year's game is basically going to be last year's game with dead silence and with red dots on the minimap, most people would have said, yeah, you know what, fair enough, that's going to be a step in the right direction. So hopefully that's the case. Wonder what meta we're going to get. What do you guys think was the best meta that we had? I'm almost tempted to say Modern Warfare, actually, just because Cold War, as much as I like that game, the 74U was so broken, man. Like, that gun was ridiculous. It could beam people across the map, and maybe some of the recent games are up there as well. Vanguard, I suppose, wasn't too bad, but bit of a soft spot for the MP5 and the M4, I'm not going to lie. But very much intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Months. Zuma Ringless with a $4.23 donation. Thank you very much. Hey Luigi, instead of talking about fans hating Kenny, how about you talk about FaZe fans hating Drazah and switching up as well? You big nose fuck. Go fuck yourself. Listen, bro, this ain't about me. This is about y'all, motherfucker. Shut the fuck up, bitch. This is about y'all, bro. You know what I mean? This ain't about me. This about y'all. You know what I mean? Fuck, bro. Shit. Man, fucking. I think that guy's just mad. Because his team's got 2 tournaments in 6 years, while my team's got multiple and averages a top placing and top 2. So I think he's a little mad. I think he's a little fucking mad. You know what I mean? I think he's a little pissed off. But that's not my fucking problem. You know what I mean? That's not my problem. That's a problem with himself. He's got to worry about himself.